Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Miller. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals come from the people you've sacrificed everything to help. For years, I dedicated my entire life to caring for my disabled wife, restructuring my world around her needs and limitations. I never imagined that while I was devoted to her, I would discover a betrayal so deep that it would destroy not just our marriage, but my faith in the goodness of human nature itself. Kimberly and I had been married for 3 years before our lives changed forever. The initial 3 years of marriage seemed stable between two people who genuinely loved and supported each other. We had met in our last year of college, dated for 2 years before getting engaged, and had been building what I believed was a solid foundation for a lifetime together. Our early marriage had been everything I had hoped it would be. We both worked full-time jobs. I worked at the accounting department of a mid-sized firm, and Kimberly worked in the media team of a marketing company. Within a year of getting married, we had purchased a small house in a quiet neighborhood, were building our savings, and had started talking about starting a family in a few years. Kimberly was an active, energetic person who loved outdoor activities and physical challenges. Her vitality and enthusiasm for life were among the qualities that had first attracted me to her, and I loved sharing in her adventures and supporting her various interests and pursuits. But everything changed on a rainy Tuesday evening in October, when Kimberly was driving home from work. A drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into the driver's side of her car at high speed. The impact was devastating, crushing the entire left side of the vehicle and trapping Kimberly inside for nearly an hour, while emergency responders worked to extract her from the wreckage. The injuries she sustained in that accident were life-altering. The impact had caused severe damage to her spine, specifically to her lumbar and thoracic vertebrae. After multiple surgeries and months of hospitalization, the doctors delivered the news that would define the rest of our lives together. Kimberly would be permanently disabled, with limited mobility and chronic pain that would require ongoing management and care. The woman who had once hiked mountain trails and scaled rock faces was now confined to a wheelchair, dependent on others for many basic daily activities. The physical trauma was compounded by the emotional and psychological impact of losing her independence and having to completely reimagine her future. I made the decision immediately and without hesitation that I would be there for Kimberly through every aspect of her recovery and adjustment to her new reality. The woman I had married was still the same person inside, regardless of her physical limitations, and I was committed to supporting her through this incredibly difficult transition. The months that followed the accident were a crash course in caregiving that I had never expected to need. I learned how to assist with transfers from bed to wheelchair, how to help with personal hygiene when her mobility was limited, how to manage her medications and pain management routine, and how to adapt our home environment to accommodate her wheelchair and other mobility needs. I also had to completely restructure my work schedule and career priorities to accommodate Kimberly's care needs. I negotiated with my employer to work from home several days a week, reduced my hours when necessary for medical appointments, and took on additional responsibilities at home that Kimberly could no longer handle independently. The insurance settlement from the drunk driving accident provided some financial support, but it wasn't enough to cover all the ongoing medical expenses, equipment needs, and home modifications required for Kimberly's care. I found myself working extra hours when possible to supplement our income, often staying up late to complete work projects after spending the day focused on Kimberly's needs. But I didn't resent these sacrifices because I loved Kimberly and wanted to do everything possible to help her adapt to her new circumstances and maintain the best possible quality of life. I saw my role as her caregiver as an extension of my commitment as her husband, and I approached it with the same dedication I brought to any important responsibility. The physical modifications we made to our home were extensive and expensive. We installed ramps at all the entrances, widened doorways to accommodate her wheelchair, renovated the bathroom with accessible fixtures, and converted our guest room into a main floor bedroom so Kimberly wouldn't have to navigate stairs. Every aspect of our living space had to be reconsidered through the lens of accessibility and safety. Beyond the physical adaptations, the emotional and psychological adjustments were equally challenging. Kimberly struggled with depression and anger about her situation, which was completely understandable given the magnitude of the changes she was facing. She grieved the loss of her former physical abilities and independence, and some days were much harder than others in terms of her emotional state and outlook. I tried to be as supportive and understanding as possible during these difficult periods, recognizing that her frustration and sadness were natural responses to trauma and loss. I encouraged her to work with a therapist to process her emotions, and I attended counseling sessions with her when she felt it would be helpful. The social isolation that often accompanies disability was another challenge we had to navigate together. Many of Kimberly's former activities and social connections were no longer accessible to her, and she had to find new ways to engage with the world and maintain relationships with friends and family members. I became not just her caregiver, but also her primary social connection and emotional support system. This was a role I was willing to take on, but it was also emotionally and physically exhausting to be responsible for so many aspects of another person's daily life and well-being. As part of Kimberly's ongoing medical care, she began working with a physical therapist named Duncan who specialized in helping people with spinal cord injuries maximize their remaining mobility and strength. Physical therapy became a regular part of her weekly routine, with sessions both at the clinic and exercises that she could do at home. Duncan seemed knowledgeable and professional. After a few weeks of this therapy, Kimberly appeared to be making some progress with her strength and mobility under his guidance. I was grateful that she had access to specialized care that might help improve her quality of life and independence over time. The therapy sessions provided Kimberly with goals to work toward and a sense of progress that was important for her mental health. She would often come home from sessions with Duncan feeling more optimistic and motivated, which was a welcome change from the periods of depression and discouragement that had been common in the first years after her accident. I encouraged Kimberly's commitment to physical therapy and supported her attendance at sessions, often rearranging my own schedule to provide transportation when needed. The therapy seemed to be one of the few bright spots in her otherwise challenging daily routine, and I was happy to see her engaged with something that brought her hope and a sense of purpose. Over the years, I had settled into the routines and responsibilities of caregiving while trying to maintain some semblance of normal life and relationship dynamics. It wasn't easy, and there were many days when I felt overwhelmed by the constant demands and the weight of responsibility for Kimberly's care and well-being. But I had made a commitment to our marriage and to her, and I believed that supporting each other through difficult times was what marriage meant. I had promised to be there in sickness and in health, and I was determined to honor that commitment regardless of how challenging it became. 5 years after this accident, we had developed what I thought was a functional routine that balanced Kimberly's care needs with maintaining our relationship and my ability to work and support us financially. While our lives were very different from what we had originally planned, I believed we were making the best of a difficult situation. On what started as an ordinary Saturday afternoon, I decided to wash our car in the driveway. It was a beautiful spring day, and I thought some time outside working with my hands might be relaxing after a busy week at work. Kimberly was inside the house, and I had set up everything I needed for a thorough car wash. I was enjoying the simple, meditative task of cleaning the car and taking my time to do a thorough job. The warm sunshine and physical activity felt good after spending most of the week indoors at my desk or focused on indoor caregiving tasks. As I was rinsing soap off the car with a garden hose, some water splashed in an unexpected direction and hit the patio table where Kimberly had left her phone. I immediately went over to check on the phone, concerned that water damage might cause problems with a device that was so important for her daily communication and independence. When I picked the phone to dry it off, I could see that water had gotten inside the case, and the screen was behaving erratically. I wiped it gently with a dry towel, trying to remove as much moisture as possible, but the phone kept operating itself, opening apps and scrolling through screens without any input for me. I brought the phone inside to Kimberly and explained what had happened, apologizing for the accident and the potential damage. She was understandably concerned about the phone since it was such an important tool for her daily life, especially given her mobility limitations. We agreed that I should take the phone to a repair technician as soon as possible to see if the water damage could be fixed or if the internal components needed to be replaced. Kimberly's phone contained important contacts, medical information, and apps that she relied on for various aspects of managing her daily routine. I found a highly rated electronics repair shop that specialized in water damage and took the phone there first thing Monday morning. The technician explained that water damage could be unpredictable and that they would need to disassemble the phone, clean all the components, and test everything to determine what could be salvaged. The repair process took several days, during which Kimberly had to rely on our landline and my phone for essential communications. While this was inconvenient, we managed the temporary arrangement and waited to hear back from the repair shop about whether the phone could be fully restored. When I picked up the phone from the technician, he explained that they had been able to clean and repair most of the internal components and that the phone should function normally again. However, he recommended that I test all the functions and apps to make sure everything was working properly before considering the repair complete. I brought the phone home and began going through it systematically to confirm that everything was working as it should. I checked the basic functions like calling and texting, tested the camera and various apps, and made sure that Kimberly's important information and settings had been preserved through the repair process. As I was scrolling through different functions and apps to test them, I stumbled across something that Kimberly never thought I would see. In her text messaging app, there was an extensive conversation thread between her and Duncan, her physical therapist, that was clearly not professional in nature. The messages revealed that Kimberly and Duncan had been having some sort of affair for over a year. The conversations were intimate and romantic, filled with expressions of love and desire that made it clear their relationship had progressed far beyond the professional boundaries that should have existed between a patient and healthcare provider. But what made the discovery even more devastating was learning the extent of their betrayal. The messages revealed that they had been meeting at our home, in my bedroom, when I was away at work or running errands. While I was out earning money to support our household and pay for Kimberly's care, she was using our marital bed to conduct an affair with the man I was paying to help her recover from her injuries. The timeline of messages showed that this had been going on for more than a year, meaning that Kimberly had been systematically deceiving me while I was dedicating my life to her care and support. Every day that I had worked to accommodate her needs and provide for her comfort, she had been planning and conducting this betrayal. Reading through the messages was like having my heart ripped out of my chest. The woman I had sacrificed everything to care for, the woman whose life I had completely restructured my own around, had been conducting a secret relationship with another man using the very resources and support I was providing. The messages also revealed details about their physical relationship that made it clear Kimberly's disability had not prevented her from being intimate with Duncan. While she had often claimed to be too tired or in too much pain for physical intimacy with me, she was apparently able to be physically active with her therapist. The betrayal was multifaceted and devastating on every level. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a complete violation of the trust and commitment that had sustained me through years of caregiving. It was a mockery of every sacrifice I had made and every accommodation I had provided for her benefit. I sat in my car outside our house for nearly an hour, trying to process what I had discovered and figure out how to confront Kimberly about it. The evidence was undeniable, but I knew she would likely try to minimize or explain away what I had found. When I finally went inside, I found Kimberly in the living room, and I immediately confronted her about what I had discovered on her phone. I showed her the messages and asked her to explain what had been going on between her and Duncan. Her initial response was complete denial, even when the evidence was right there in front of both of us. She claimed the messages were taken out of context, that Duncan was just being supportive during a difficult time, and that I was misinterpreting innocent communications. When I pressed her about the specific content of the messages and the references to their meetings in our bedroom, she tried to water down the situation by claiming it had been a momentary lapse in judgment and that it didn't mean anything significant. But I had read enough of their communications to know that this was not a momentary lapse or a misunderstanding. This was a sustained, ongoing relationship that had been developing over more than a year while I was caring for her and supporting our household. I told Kimberly that our marriage was over, that I could not continue to be married to someone who would betray me so completely while I was dedicating my life to her care. The violation of trust was too fundamental and too extensive to be forgiven or worked through. Kimberly refused to accept that the marriage was ending, claiming that we could work through this problem and that she would end her relationship with Duncan immediately. She promised that it would never happen again and that she would do whatever was necessary to rebuild my trust. But the damage was too extensive and the betrayal too complete for me to consider reconciliation. This wasn't a single mistake or a momentary weakness. This was a systematic deception that had been going on for over a year while I was exhausting myself to provide for her care and support. I told Kimberly that I would be filing for divorce and that she needed to make arrangements for her care and housing since I would no longer be able to provide those services. The thought of continuing to be her caregiver while knowing about her betrayal was emotionally impossible for me to contemplate. Kimberly's response to my decision was a mixture of pleading, anger, and attempted manipulation. She alternated between promising to change, claiming that I was abandoning her in her time of need, and suggesting that I was being unreasonable and unforgiving about what she characterized as a minor mistake. But I had seen enough evidence to know that this was not a minor mistake or a temporary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated betrayal that had been ongoing for a significant period of time, conducted in our home and our bed while I was working to support both of us. I moved out of our shared bedroom immediately and began the process of contacting a divorce attorney to understand my options and the legal requirements for ending our marriage. The practical aspects of divorce would be complicated by Kimberly's disability and care needs, but I was determined to extract myself from a marriage that had become based on lies and deception. The divorce process was emotionally and financially devastating. Kimberly's attorney argued that I was abandoning a disabled spouse and that my responsibilities as a caregiver created special obligations that should be considered in the property division and support arrangements. My attorney countered that Kimberly's affair constituted abandonment of the marriage on her part, and that her disability did not excuse her infidelity or create special entitlements to my assets and income. The legal battle became a complex mixture of family law, disability rights issues, and questions about marital obligations and betrayal. The discovery process revealed additional details about Kimberly's relationship with Duncan that made the betrayal even more painful. Their affair had been conducted with a level of planning and deception that showed complete disregard for my feelings and our marriage commitment. Kimberly's medical records and therapy schedules were subpoenaed to establish the timeline of her relationship with Duncan and to demonstrate how she had used her medical care as a cover for conducting the affair. The evidence showed that many of her supposed therapy appointments had actually been personal meetings with Duncan. The financial aspects of the divorce were particularly challenging because of the accommodations I had made to our home and lifestyle to support Kimberly's disability. The wheelchair ramps, accessible bathroom, and other modifications I had paid for were considered improvements to the marital property that would benefit Kimberly regardless of her retained ownership of the house. The settlement negotiations were protracted and contentious, with Kimberly's attorney arguing that her disability entitled her to a larger share of our assets and ongoing support payments. They claimed that her affair was irrelevant to her financial needs and that I had a moral and legal obligation to continue supporting her care. My attorney fought these claims, arguing that Kimberly's betrayal had violated the fundamental basis of our marriage and that her disability did not excuse her conduct or create special entitlements to my assets. The legal battle was expensive and emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. During the months of legal proceedings, I had to continue living in the same house with Kimberly while we worked out the details of our separation. This arrangement was incredibly difficult given what I knew about her betrayal and the ongoing legal conflict between us. Kimberly made various attempts to reconcile during this period, sometimes apologizing for her affair and promising to rebuild our marriage, and other times becoming angry and accusatory about what she characterized as my abandonment of her in her time of need. But I was resolved that the marriage was over and that no amount of promises or emotional manipulation would change my decision. The betrayal had been too systematic and too extensive for me to ever trust her again, and I could not imagine continuing to provide intimate care for someone who had violated our relationship so completely. The divorce proceedings also revealed the impact that Kimberly's affair had had on Duncan's professional standing. As a licensed physical therapist, his relationship with a patient violated professional ethical standards and potentially jeopardized his license and career. When the affair became known through the legal proceedings, Duncan faced professional discipline from the state licensing board and potential termination from his employer. The consequences of their relationship extended beyond just our marriage to affect his professional reputation and livelihood. After months of legal battles, negotiations, and court hearings, the divorce was finally finalized. The settlement required me to give up a significant portion of our shared assets, including a larger share of the house equity and some of my retirement savings, to provide for Kimberly's ongoing care and living expenses. While the financial cost was substantial and painful, I considered it a worthwhile price to pay for my freedom from a marriage that had become built on deception and betrayal. The years I had spent as Kimberly's caregiver had taught me that I was capable of great sacrifice and dedication. But they had also shown me that some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. The process of rebuilding my life after the divorce was challenging, but ultimately liberating. For the first time in years, I was able to focus on my own needs and interests without constantly accommodating someone else's care requirements and limitations. I moved into a smaller apartment that was designed for my own preferences and lifestyle, rather than accessibility requirements. I was able to return to a normal work schedule without having to arrange my professional life around medical appointments and caregiving responsibilities. The emotional recovery from the betrayal took longer than the practical adjustments to living alone again. Learning that someone you've sacrificed everything for has been systematically deceiving you creates lasting damage to your ability to trust and form intimate relationships. I began working with a therapist to process the trauma of discovering Kimberly's affair and the years of caregiving that had preceded it. The counseling helped me understand that being betrayed by someone you're caring for creates a particularly complex form of emotional damage that requires specialized attention and healing. Through therapy, I came to understand that my dedication to caring for Kimberly had been genuine and admirable, but that her betrayal was a reflection of her character rather than any failure on my part. I had honored my commitments and sacrifices, while she had chosen to violate the trust that made those sacrifices meaningful. The experience taught me important lessons about the difference between unconditional love and enabling destructive behavior. While I had approached caregiving with genuine devotion and selflessness, Kimberly had taken advantage of my dedication to pursue her own selfish desires without regard for the impact on our marriage or my well-being. Looking back on the years I spent caring for Kimberly, I can see that there were probably signs of her dissatisfaction and potential for betrayal that I chose to ignore or rationalize away. Her emotional distance, lack of appreciation for my sacrifices, and increasing focus on activities outside our home might have been warning signs that I was too devoted to recognize. The discovery of her affair through the accidental water damage to her phone felt like a cruel irony, that such a simple, random event would reveal such a systematic and devastating betrayal. If I hadn't been washing the car that day, or if the water hadn't splashed in just the right direction, I might have continued living in ignorance of her deception for much longer. Today, I'm grateful that the truth was revealed when it was, even though the discovery was incredibly painful. Living unknowingly as the betrayed caregiver of an unfaithful spouse would have been a waste of more years of my life and emotional energy. The experience changed my understanding of marriage, commitment, and the limits of unconditional love. While I believe in supporting your partner through difficult times, I also learned that some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome and that self-respect sometimes requires walking away from relationships that have become harmful or destructive. The woman whom I cared for through years of disability repaid my dedication with systematic betrayal, but her actions ultimately freed me from a relationship that had become one-sided and unsustainable. The water that splashed on her phone that day revealed not just her affair, but the true nature of our marriage and the person I had been sacrificing everything to support. While the divorce was expensive and emotionally devastating, it was also the beginning of my liberation from a situation that had been slowly destroying my own well-being and self-respect. Sometimes the most painful discoveries are also the most necessary for moving toward a healthier and more authentic life.